I've got four questions for you, all centered around the 2024 Fighting Irish football schedule. Here's the first one. What do you believe is going to be the most difficult game?
Yeah, I know we had this conversation where we both kind of ranked the schedule last week, Darren. I said I was going to get to it the day that we spoke. I think I got to it the next day or the day after that. Regardless, I did get to it, and I did spend some time thinking about it. And I landed on Texas A&M as number one. And I think a lot of people are thinking that they're kind of going through, I wouldn't say tumultuous times, but it's an interesting time with getting rid of Jimbo Fisher. And, you never know what the first year of any head coach is going to look like. You didn't think that Marcus Freeman was going to lose to Stanford and Marshall in that first year. So maybe there's some unexpected things for Mike Elko at Texas A&M in year one. But this is what I kind of landed on. Our good colleague, Jack Sobel at Blue and Gold, he did tremendous work kind of reviewing these opponents and looking into them and studying them for our Blue and Gold Illustrated preview magazine. And he landed on Connor Wegman as the number one quarterback on this Notre Dame schedule, the best quarterback. So I said, okay, if he's the best quarterback, and I think Mike Elko is in that conversation for the best opposing head coach. Obviously, you have Mike Norvell as well, but I mean, Jeff Brom, who else are you looking at in that conversation? I think Elko is certainly in that top three. You have the best quarterback. You might have the best coach. You're playing in front of 100,000 plus people at Kyle Field, which is one of the toughest places to play. As I said a couple weeks ago, you ask EA Sports, they will tell you it's the toughest place to play. I don't know about that, but it is hard. And College Game Day is going to be there, and it's week one, and there's so many uncertainties. For all of those reasons, Texas A&M might not be the best overall team on Notre Dame's schedule. But again, I certainly think it's top 3-4 for sure. But the surrounding circumstances and everything that goes with it, Darren, I think that is the toughest game for Notre Dame in 2024 is that first one at Texas A&M.
In the 6 o'clock hour of today's show, I'm ranking the Notre Dame opponent top 10 draft prospects for the 2025 draft cycle. 5 of the 10 are from Texas A&M. That caught me off guard a little bit. It's a very, very talented football team with their quarterback now healthy. Tyler, Irish schedule, what do you believe will be the biggest blowout?
This is so tough to predict because there's a lot of teams. I will bring up that article that I wrote last week again, where I was ranking these opponents. Darren, I had the toughest time in the world ranking 7 through 12 because I think Notre Dame is going to have no issues with a lot of those teams, maybe even all of those teams. Now, you say I mentioned Marshall and Stanford. I think Notre Dame is so far removed from those losses in the Marcus Freeman era that you're going to see more of what you saw last year, where I think people were giving Notre Dame a hard time for beating Central Michigan by 24 points. And I look at the end of the day, I'm like, that was still just a blowout victory. Like, that's a good win for Notre Dame. I think you're going to see a lot more of those. To answer the question, I think I ranked Northern Illinois as the worst team. Notre Dame has never lost to a MAC team. It's possible that the service academies are worse teams than Northern Illinois, and maybe even Stanford. Like we saw what Notre Dame did at Stanford last year. I think they could turn around and say, hey, we're not going to lose to you on this home field again, and do that again in South Bend. But there's something about the home opener being that Northern Illinois game and Marcus Freeman not wanting to lose like he did against Marshall a couple of years ago. I think win or lose at Texas A&M, you're going to see a motivated Notre Dame team at Notre Dame Stadium for that home opener. And I think you could see maybe like a 40-ish point victory in that. Let's say like 30-point victory. If Notre Dame won that game 42-7 or 42-10, I would not be surprised. And then at that point, you're looking at maybe the largest margin of victory for the season.
Notre Dame football update with Tyler Horka, the Notre Dame football beat reporter, Blue and Gold Illustrated, blueandgold.com, or on Budweiser's weekday sports beat on WSBT Radio and the Blue and Gold YouTube channel. Which game on paper is going to be probably a whole lot tougher than most people expect?
I keep going back to Georgia Tech, and I don't know why. The great quarterback and great running back. I think that's the best quarterback-running back tandem that you're going to see on the Notre Dame schedule, and Haynes King and Jamal Haynes, which the names go together. I think they're going to be very good together against a lot of teams, maybe even Notre Dame this year. And there's something about playing a neutral site too that I think is like Notre Dame plays 3 of them this year. And is that might be the first one too,
It's
right there? And so, I mean, it's not like they will be in the groove of playing these neutral site games, and they never played at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I mean, that stadium's only been open for half a decade, or it's only going on 10 years maybe, or whatever it may be. So there's going to be some unusual circumstances, and then that offense, I just land on that offense is kind of scary. And a couple of years ago, this Georgia Tech program was bad. I mean, but they've made some strides here in the last like year and a half or so. And like you say, they have a good quarterback. They have a good running back. I look at, are you well coached? And they're a lot better coached now than they were a couple of years ago. They have a good quarterback. And like I said, the running back as well. So they have some things going for them that maybe if you're a Notre Dame fan, just looking at the schedule, you say, oh yeah, Georgia Tech, we always beat these ACC teams. It's going to be no matter. But then you factor in the neutral site, you factor in some of those other things I said, and I wouldn't be shocked if they're hanging around for a little bit in that one. I expect Notre Dame to win that game, but it may be dicey for a little bit.
Okay, finally, this is today's Twitter X question of the day. Which is the toughest 3-game stretch on the Notre Dame schedule? I'll give you 4 choices. At Texas A&M, Northern Illinois, at Purdue. Second choice, Louisville and Stanford at home, and then that Georgia Tech game in Atlanta. The third group of games, Georgia Tech and Atlanta, Navy and East Rutherford, and then Florida State at home. And the fourth 3-game stretch, Florida State and Virginia at home, and then Army at Yankee Stadium.
All right, so I'm going to get rid of the 2 choices that have 2 home games because I think Notre Dame showed last season that they're a pretty dang good team at home. Probably should have won all of their games at home. We won't talk much more about that Ohio State game, but I'm going to go with the option of Georgia Tech, Navy, and Florida State because I think Florida State is probably your second toughest overall game behind that Texas A&M game. It was kind of a toss-up to me when ranking the opponents like I did last week. Is it Texas A&M? Is it Florida State? Because I think Florida State is very much in reload, not rebuild territory. Mike Norvell, heck of a coach. DJ Uiagalelei doesn't scare me a whole lot, but if he somehow channels what he did in 2020 against Notre Dame, then you have some issues. I think he's more of the guy that we saw a couple of years ago with Clemson, but no matter, maybe he finds his revitalization with Mike Norvell and at Florida State and surrounded by some really good players. So you have that on the list. We already talked about Georgia Tech and why I think that could be a scary game. And then Navy, you have the possibility of Notre Dame doing what it did in Dublin against Navy. And I think that's kind of what we're more used to seeing Notre Dame do. But go back a couple of years, Darren. Remember when Notre Dame was beating Navy by 19 points in Baltimore, I believe it was. I was at this game. And then all of a sudden you're talking about a 3-point Notre Dame victory. Again, it's kind of like the Marshall and Stanford thing. I think this Fighting Irish program is so much farther along now than it was then. But sometimes Navy can just kind of sneak up and give you some issues. I know there's some message board posters at blueandgold.com who hate playing Navy just because of the weird intricacies that go along with playing a service academy and the option offense and all of those different things. So if you give me neutral site, weird things attached to both of those games, good quarterback, like I said, in the first one of those, and then I just pumped up Florida State for reasons that I think everyone that's a college football fan knows. I mean, this is a 13-0 football team last year. That's probably among those stretches that you named. I think that's the toughest 3-game stretch that Notre Dame has.